Good evening. I am Jane.
I'm Tyler, and we're going to be discussing path goal theory for your folks.
All right, enjoy.
Before we start, please head to the following link. The link should be posted on YouTube, and it will also be posted on our handout. So the link takes us to SurveyMonkey. We're going to have you do a brief survey on some opinion things. And then for our case studies, we kind of wanted to see how everyone responded. So there's just one multiple choice question for each case study and one fill in the space. It doesn't have to be long, but we thought it would be a fun element to discuss in class.
We also posted a handout that is a note taker. If you get a chance, print that out. And so you can take notes while you watch the presentation. And the handout will also have all of our case studies in there that you can follow along and read with us.
So let's start with what path goal theory is. It's pretty simple. It's how leaders motivate followers to accomplish designated goals. It's by many accounts, a more dynamic leadership style. And there's some perks to that, and there's some problems with that. We'll discuss those later on.
So how it works, the principles of path goal theory can be used by leaders at all levels in the organization and for all types of tasks. So when you use this, there's not really a level of the organization that can use it. Any level can use it, and for any task. So it's very applicable.
Especially if you're a school leader and you want to distribute this theory and this practice amongst your staff leaders and things like that, you could easily do so.
And see how it works for you. So the basic idea of path goal theory is that there's subordinates and there's this path. And along this path, there are obstacles that arise. And your goal is to achieve, your goal could be anything, but it's to be productive or effective, whatever your goal is. But we recognize that along this path, there may be obstacles. And in this path goal to leadership, you have to define your goals, clarify the path, remove obstacles, and provide support. So this is what the leader is doing.
Primarily as a leader, you're thinking about the obstacles that you might encounter, thinking about obstacles with your subordinates. And then again, you're providing different levels of support and different types of support for your subordinates to achieve the goals you've hopefully communicated and hopefully you're working together.
And part of this theory too is that you can kind of plan ahead and think about what obstacles you may have along your path, and it should help you.
So, all right. So first thing on our SurveyMonkey survey is this. I think to get your brains percolating a little bit, and I think it'd be a fun and interesting thing to share with the class, considering we're all aspiring leaders, is ways we motivate followers. So take a moment to think of 5 ways to motivate followers. Think of ways you've been motivated. Think what's effective in your profession and in other professions.
You can answer this in the SurveyMonkey right now, or you can just jot some notes down on your note taker and answer it later. So take a moment right now.
So path goal behaviors. The path goal theory approach examines these leadership behaviors to achieve your goals. So you're either going to be directive,
supportive,
participative,
and achievement oriented.
So this will be on our handout as well. This is the basic table breakdown of path goal theory and how it works. So it gives you a leadership behavior based on follower characteristics or obstacles you may encounter, and task characteristics, which are also obstacles you may encounter.
So I thought it was really interesting because we just got done reading the situational approach, and I see how path goal theory really relates to that, because you're looking at your follower characteristics and then directing your leadership behavior according to that, which is very similar to what we're doing in situational approach. So it was interesting to relate the two.
Yeah, absolutely. So scenario 1. So again, we're peppering these scenarios throughout. So we thought it'd be kind of nice to break up the discussion and the synthesis of the chapter with these scenarios to keep your brains percolating, keep you active and entertained.
And we will ask you some reflection questions after each scenario that, again, you can answer on the Survey Monkey or on your handout.
So scenario one.
Oh, and on your handout.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, sorry.
So scenario one, you are a third year principal of high school that has been in transition for a number of years. With your student population in flux, a high number of SPED and EL students, and your school being in a high needs area, you've determined it's finally time to move from discussing an MTSS plan, which you've been doing since you started leading this school, to finally implementing one.
So based on the path goal theory, which leadership behavior would be the most effective for this scenario? Remember, we're looking at those 4 behaviors: directive, supportive,
Participative,
and achievement oriented. The other question is, how might you increase motivation amongst your followers regarding the completion of this task?
All right, back to the theory itself. So the synthesis of this theory. In theory, it provides a set of assumptions about how various leadership styles interact with characteristics of followers in the work setting to affect motivation of followers. Kind of repetitious. Once again, we have to emphasize the in theory part. So we kind of want to go into so moving on to scenario 2.
All right. So you are the new science department leader in a middle school that has functioned largely the same way under the previous department leader for the last 12 years. Your department has usually performed on par with other departments regards the state mandated assessments your students take, but each of your department members has been operating with complete autonomy for the entirety of the previous department leader's tenure. A condition of your acceptance of department leader was increasing alignment across department members, implementing common assessments, and integrating common SLOs and unit plans. So you have to think about collaborating your departments instead of having them having their own autonomy. Now we're thinking about what would you do to align these departments. So again,
based on the path goal theory, which leadership behavior would be most effective for this scenario? And what obstacles do you expect to encounter from your department as you attempt to complete this task? So we wanted to talk about the strengths of path goal theory. First, path goal theory provides a useful theoretical framework for understanding how various leadership behaviors affect followers' satisfaction and work performance. It also is one of the first situational theories of leadership to explain how task and follower characteristics affect the impact of leadership on follower performance. Again, there's a little more synergy between the tasks, follower characteristics, and follower performance in relation to the obstacles you might encounter.
It's just really interesting how everything we've read is just aligning, because we talked about relationship and task behavior. Then we looked at, the situational approach, and now we're looking into path goal theory, and all these things, they're different, but they're very similar. I look at follower characteristics. My mind just keeps going back to situational approach. How do we look at our followers, and what is the best way to lead them, and what is the best path to take with our followers?
And as you see, it also attempts to integrate motivation. So again, thinking about the motivation of our followers. Perhaps the greatest trait also is it provides a model that in certain ways is very practical. Mm-hmm. Again, it's dynamic. It can be used at every level of the organization. Mm-hmm. And it accounts for multiple variables.
When I think about leaders in my life and people that have influenced me, they were the people that I name as motivating people. And thinking about this theory and what will we do as leaders, how will we motivate people? Because for me, that's what I remember, how people motivated me. So I think this theory can have a lot of impact when used correctly.
Absolutely.
With your staff or your followers.
And if you think about your leaders, they probably didn't they didn't have a static leadership path or a static leadership behavior. They probably shifted behavior based off of what they encountered.
That's true. If we think of leaders and how they impact us, at least for me, the most impactful leaders are very dynamic. They're not stagnant leaders.
So we wanted to dive a little bit into the research behind this chapter. Again, I always think it's useful to take a look at not only the theories themselves, but how these theories are being presented to us and how they're formulated. So Northouse, towards the end of the chapter, gave the following quote: as an example of the strength and approach of path goal theory. He said, by giving care and support, the chair helps the junior faculty member gain a sense of confidence about his or her ability to perform the work. So I was looking at that, and I assumed that this was from a real world scenario that actually occurred based on this piece of research. But jumping into the research, it was interesting. The research in this research study by Bess and Goldman in 2001 examined 5 leadership studies: situational, charismatic, transformational, path goal, and exchange. Please excuse the typo in exchange. And we've seen this before referenced, but I wanted to see what it actually said. So when looking at this study and most of the studies in path goal theory, and this is a major criticism of the theory, is most of the research and the studies aren't based on real world quantifiable data. Most of them are hypothetical. So in this one, they did an extensive literature review of these 5 leadership studies, and then they moved on to come up with hypothetical scenarios and hypothetical situations that might be difficult in specific scenarios. And it's useful. We provide one for you to check out, to think about, but again, it lacks the real world objective data.
Mm-hmm. But having some sympathy for the researcher over here, if you're conducting that study, think about how difficult it would be to go into somebody's leadership path, or going perhaps into a school and a principal having this vision and this path with this specific person and analyzing and figuring out what's working, what's not. It's very difficult to go in real time, real life in these scenarios, because a lot of those things kind of just happen as you go.
Creating a dynamic leadership structure, a leadership theory, your goal is for it to be dynamic and ever changing. So to create static and objective data on something you're probably evaluating subjectively is difficult.
It's very difficult.
The other thing is by leaving your theories broad and by leaving them broad and leaving your terminology broad and your objectives and your focus broad, you can often allow your theory of leadership or your theory of anything to evolve. And that's very clear in the research. The research has evolved over time. Their focus has evolved over time. That said, again, major criticisms and lack of objective data. So here's scenario 3. Back to them. You guys are stoked. I can tell. So scenario 3, you are a first-year principal and you have a first-year high school teacher who has been given a rather challenging class load this semester. This teacher is teaching 2 sections of sophomore English, 2 sections of freshman co-taught English, 1 section of yearbook, and 1 section of theater. You know that the old principal created schedules with seniority in mind, as well as the fact that it's too late to adjust this teacher's schedule, and that within 2 months of starting the school year, this teacher's behavior referrals have slowly been rising every week. Determined to assist this teacher and make sure they have an effective and fulfilling year. Hiccup. You decide you are going to utilize as many resources as you can to improve this teacher's effectiveness this year.
So very busy schedule for this teacher.
And very common too for first-year teachers.
That's true. So based on the path goal theory, which leadership behavior would be the most effective for this scenario? Again, you're looking at directive, supportive,
participative,
and achievement-oriented. And how could you foster collaborative relationships to provide more resources for this teacher as well?
Moving on. So criticisms of path goal theory, I've already broadly laid them out. Again, it's so complex and incorporates so many different aspects of leadership. And interpreting the theory, especially in a concrete way, can be very confusing. It has received only partial support from many empirical and quantitative research studies.
And a great deal of research has been designed to study directive and supportive leadership, but fewer studies address the participative and the achievement-oriented leadership.
And last, it does not describe how a leader could use various styles directly to help followers feel competent or assured of success.
But again, how do you describe directly how you're going to motivate somebody?
Yeah.
It's just hard.
And then if you want a complex and dynamic theory, again, interpreting this and translating this into objective data that's relevant for a dynamic audience is pretty difficult.
Yes.
So last scenario.
So you are a seventh year teacher taking over a classroom that has been suddenly vacated due to legal action and investigations taking place in relation to a behavioral incident during class or a physical altercation may have taken place between a teacher and a student. So during the investigation, the class was run by a long-term sub for 2 weeks. It's been made clear by administration that the teacher will not be returning this year, and it is currently February and you have 4 months left in the school year. You were asked by the principal to take over this class because of your experience and the added benefit that you have a student teacher currently running your own classroom. You have control, you take control on Monday, knowing very little about the teacher's progress, the completion of work while the sub was in control of the classroom, and how receptive the students will be of a new teacher. So very difficult scenario over here.
And yet, one we've probably heard about and possibly experienced at our own sites. So based on path goal theory, which leadership behavior, and again, teachers are leaders in their own classroom, which leadership behavior would be most effective for this scenario? And what are the needs of your followers at this moment in time? So that was our final scenario. Again, if you haven't had a chance, please go to the SurveyMonkey link. It will be posted on the handout. It's posted at the beginning of our presentation here, and we'll hopefully be able to post it on YouTube. Here are our references, and thank you for your time.
Hopefully you enjoyed and you got some reflection time.
All right. Now,
All right.
here's the awkward part where we turn off this presentation.